All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have a jam-packed agenda, and I am super excited that this is happening. I'm going to go ahead and record this. Yes, we are recording it. So, oh yeah, it does look like it's recording. Beautiful. Okay, so welcome. Thank you so much for being here, and we are just super excited to provide this event. I usually do these live in various states, but this time we got to, obviously, we're all virtual, so super exciting to just have every state. We'll find out in just a second kind of where you're from and who you're representing and what you do in terms of education. But I am just really excited to have all of you here. And so before that, I want to do a land acknowledgement statement for where the Committee for Children offices sit in Seattle, Washington. And so before we begin our presentation with our webinar today, I want to acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples. Committee for Children's offices specifically sit on the land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish tribe. As we honor the Duwamish people and their ancestors, it's also important that we consider our place in the past, present, and future history of the Indigenous peoples of our region, and as well as hope we can best support them. So with that being said, I would love to introduce our team here at Committee for Children that works in the Northeast. Many of you know who I am. Many of you may be familiar with the faces on this screen. My name is Kate Tobias. I am a Senior Education Partnerships Manager. I've been with CFC Committee for Children for 6 years, working only in the Northeast. So I'm really excited to just be a part of this and continue our work in districts. And so I'll let my esteemed colleagues introduce themselves as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Travis Mung, and I am the Education Account Manager here in the Northeast for Committee for Children. And I've been here for about a year now, and I'm excited to be here with you all today.
Awesome. Go for it, Bonnie.
All right, I'm Bonnie Andreasen, and I'm the Success Manager here for the Northeast. And that means I work with school leadership, principals, assistant principals, counselors, and the like, supporting their implementation at the school level.
Wonderful, thank you. And Chad.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Chad Park. I'm the Education Partnership Manager, and I work with Kate and Travis and Bonnie.
Awesome. And Chad, how long have you been with Committee for Children?
Oh my goodness, over 3 years now.
Awesome, perfect. Well, and just to give you a sense of kind of who we represent and who the states that we work with, we have 14 states in our territory. So we break up the country. There's a bunch of us that get the honor and privilege to work with districts and schools to bring social emotional learning, the Child Protection Unit, if you've heard of that, our bullying prevention units, these programs, and we get to work with these districts and schools to work with social emotional learning and to drive initiatives and to support you in whatever way we can in terms of your social emotional learning initiatives. So these are the states that we represent. I just wanted to show you a picture. And so we hope that there's a representative from every state here. So with that, I'm going to open a poll. I'm hoping this works. And so I would love to know what you do for your district or organization, and then also where you're from. So I'm going to launch this. And this is just what is your title? So this is great. Just give you about 30 seconds to fill that out. Great. All right, I'm going to end this because it doesn't look like it's moving anymore. So I'm going to end this. And so we have lots of administrators here, lots of district level administrators, and then a lot of other as well. So if you chose other, would you also, oh, I can share the results. I didn't realize that. So I can share the results. So that's who's represented here, and that's super exciting. And then I'd love for you to just share what state you're from. And then, yeah, I will stop sharing that. Yeah, so if you want to write in the chat box where you're from, that would be fantastic. And say hello from wherever part of the Northeast that you are. We are in Seattle, Washington. I know you heard that from our land acknowledgement, but and so we are 3 hours behind you in time zone, and so you guys are well into your afternoons, and we're still in the morning. So I really appreciate you letting us know where you're from and what you do. So without further ado, I am going to introduce the fabulous Brandon Frame from the Urban Assembly in New York. And I'm just going to read this description of himself that he sent me. And I'm just so excited to have him here. I've been working with Brandon for about the last year. We were supposed to be in a live event in New Jersey that did not happen based on the pandemic. And so I'm just excited to hear him speak and him to be a part of this. So here's Brandon. Brandon is a visionary leader, social innovator, and educator. He is the founder and chief visionary officer of the Black Man Can Incorporated, an award-winning nonprofit that amplifies the stories of what Black men and boys can do outside of his 9-to-5, if you will. But within his workday, Brandon Frame is the director of social emotional learning at the Urban Assembly, where he leads a team and portfolio of schools to build the capacity of the staff in implementing and sustaining social emotional learning. Under his tenure as a leader of the Urban Assembly's Resilient Scholars Program, participating schools saw dramatic reductions in suspensions and improvements in school culture, and the program expanded nationally to states like Texas, Virginia, and California. Brandon is also co-founder of the award-winning Twitter chat Hip Hopped, and the author of Define Yourself. No, it's Hip Hoped. I just read that wrong, didn't I? It's Hip Hoped. So hashtag Hip Hoped. And the author of Define Yourself, Redefine the World, a guided journal for boys and men of color, and the children's book, My First Tie. So Brandon, I'm gonna stop sharing and you can share your screen, and hopefully all of you can see your face if I stop talking and you start talking.
All righty, I'm gonna share my screen. Good morning. Actually, good morning to the West Coast, and good afternoon to everyone in the eastern region here of the United States. Hopefully, it's a sunny day where you are. It's a sunny day here in New York City. So I'm just getting to share my screen. So good afternoon, good morning, happy Thursday. I think these days start to run together now. I'm not sure always what day it is. I always know when it's Friday. That's when I always know it's Friday, and I always know it's Monday. The other days are a little bit of a blur, but good afternoon. I'm truly happy to be here and share some remarks around SEL and equity. Just a little about me. It was already shared, Director of Social Emotional Learning. The Urban Assembly is a nonprofit focused on increasing social and economic mobility of students through improving education. And how we do that specifically in the SEL department is through the Resilient Scholars Program. What the Resilient Scholars Program actually is a guided implementation model that helps schools and districts organize themselves around the principles of social emotional learning. We work to do the implementation, sustain, and build the capacity to do this work. I know that in this time right now, it's something that has become even more of importance, right? I think we've been talking about social emotional learning, but now it is at the forefront of everyone's minds. And it's important that we keep it there. I think that's really important that we keep it there. We can't let SCL be a form of triage, because that's my feeling. My wondering is sometimes, and I'm gonna get into my remarks, but my wondering around this is what happens when everybody's back in school and like this hyper focus back to, instruction and testing and whatnot, and people are move away from people's feelings and how are people doing, but even moving into the actual social emotional development. And what we know is that social emotional learning will impact academic development when we center our schools around that. So again, and as was mentioned, a few fun facts about me. I'm a children's book author and founder of The Black Man Can. And so I wasn't really watching the chat, so I may ask people to do something that they have already done, but I would love to hear where everybody's from. And so if you can write in the chat what you do. I saw that I did catch the poll, but not necessarily in the chat. So where are you from? What do you do? If I saw we got the Eastern region, is Connecticut in the building. I'm from Hartford, Windsor, Connecticut. That's where I'm from. So I would love to see as I read in the chat. So we got Director of Special Education from New York, school counselors, Director of Social Emotional Learning, New York, New York. We got Lisa, how you doing? Chesterfield is in the building, Maryland and New Jersey. all states that I love to visit, and I look forward to visiting when the world opens back up again. So thank you from everyone for sharing a little bit about yourself. And so as I begin, I want to take us on a journey to start. First, I want to go to Washington, D.C. Back in 2013, there was an expose on a young man who was the valedictorian of a high school. Because of his academic excellence, he earns a scholarship to Georgetown University. But what this article chronicles in his journey is that when you read about this young man, he's constantly talking about his social emotional development. He talks about once he gets to the university, he has to build on having a stronger sense of personal responsibility. He has to increase his level of independence to set and achieve goals. He has to use positive communication and social skills to interact effectively with others. But he notes that wasn't necessarily what the focus was in his school in terms of building him up in that way, right? And now I want to take you to Dallas, Texas. And I had the opportunity to go and visit Big Thought. And Big Thought is led by Castle Award winner Byron Sanders. Amazing organization. So if you get a chance, you want to check them out. But Big Thought uses SEL to narrow the opportunity gap, right? And I had the opportunity to visit the program. And this was a program for youth who were entangled in the juvenile justice system. This program has a 98% retention rate. And going around and speaking to students, and I spoke to this one young man, and he gave me an amazing the story of how he got here and why this program was so beneficial to him. But he said something that I want to share with you all that was really, really important and really stuck with me. And it sticks with me and is a guiding principle of why I do this work and why we probably all do this work. And is how come I had to do something wrong to learn social emotional learning skills? How come I had to do something wrong to learn social emotional learning skills? So I'm thinking about the relationship of SEL and equity in two ways. One, I got to shout out Maurice Elias, because this is something that he has shared. And in two ways, in order to create and maintain amazing communities, schools, businesses, and countries, we need strong social emotional learning skills. But and also thinking about SEL and equity, students need equitable access to the very skills that will allow them to be the change agents we need for our schools, our countries, our communities, and our businesses. I use this photo. Some may have seen it and may have not seen this photo before, but many of our schools are jumbled schoolhouses that do not allow equitable access to the development of social emotional learning. Many of our schools may have a huge focus on tier 2 and tier 3 supports, right? So not all our students are getting access to receiving high quality social emotional learning. In many schools, we can find that SEL may even be a tool to control students' behavior. I find that schools are full of social emotional supports, but not always social emotional learning. So what do I mean by that? Well, let me share an example. Let's take driving a car. Now, when you're driving, there are stoplights, there's the yield sign, the white and yellow lines in the road. These are all supports to create safe conditions to drive. Nonetheless, with all these supports in place, one must still be taught how to actually drive a car. We have to teach the skills and provide the conditions to practice these skills for our students. We must take a look at jumbled schoolhouses and turn them into coherent schools with universal supports that teach and activate social emotional learning skills, which in turn allow for our students not to just be successful in our schools, but once they leave us and go out into society as individuals. And so I went and was thinking through how I wanted to do this presentation, and I wanted to, in the chat, what I'm looking for is for people to write, what is social emotional learning? Because as I travel around the country and I work with principals and district leaders, social emotional learning, when you ask people to define it, has people give varying definitions. There's not a consensus, right? So I want to first start, before I share the guiding definition that I use and that we use and that will anchor us in our conversation today, I would love for people to write in the chat, what is their definition of social emotional learning? I like that, Kristen. Intentionally teaching skills that promote social emotional well-being. Carol used the castle, skills to help humans interact successfully. From Melissa. So I'm gonna go in here. This is our guiding definition. Agreed with all of that. Yes, I'm loving everything that is coming through. At preschool level, we teach teaching social emotional skills. And so social emotional learning is the process through which children and adults, and I really hyper focus on that because we're going to come back to this, through children and adults develop the skills, attitudes, and values necessary to understand and manage life tasks such as cognitive learning, forming relationships, and the flexibility to adapt to challenges and expectations of a complex society. And it was already mentioned before in terms of it is the intentional development of these competencies such as self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, and making relationship skills for all people, right? And so I have two questions. Again, I want to make this an engaging presentation. So one, how does this align? And it aligns very well with what everybody is already thinking around their definition around social emotional learning, which is perfect. And what elements, but thinking also about equity, what elements of this definition are most critical to advancing racial equity, right? So if people can share that in their chat as well. Around their definition, but taking that to that next level around social emotional learning and how is it going to advance racial equity. So as we move forward, I want to highlight these different domains, right? Because when we talk about social emotional learning, we have our different definitions, and then we get into the competencies, right? And all of this is leading to when we talk about a systemic approach around social emotional learning to create equity, right? And so as we think about this, we think about these SEL competencies. And again, as we travel, we see varying definitions and thoughts. So we have self-awareness, recognizing who I am, what I need, and how I feel relative to the world around me. 2, self-management. I can manage my behavior in pro-social ways. 3, social awareness, demonstrate an awareness of the role and value of others in the greater community. And 4, social management, which is interact with others in meaningful and productive ways, right? And we're really hyper-focused on the intentional development of these particular skills. So what I found as I've done this work and we're looking at schools and we're having these conversations and we're taking a look at the indicators that align to the particular social emotional learning competencies. So I want to dig a little deeper and let's take a look at 1A around students demonstrating awareness of their needs and emotions. But if you notice here, we have the adult piece. Adults around me model awareness of what they need and feel, right? Because our definition was centered around both student and adult, right? If we look at self-management, let's take a look at 2D. Students demonstrate increasing levels of independence and the ability to set and achieve goals. This is exactly what we want our students to develop. But we also have to ask, as adults, are the adults around helping to set goals that show that I have influence over my own motivation, behavior, and social environment? And as we even look at social awareness and social management, and we look at the connections here, we look at 3C, right? Students demonstrate an awareness of cultural issues and a respect for human dignity and differences, but are adults around me showing how to care about and respect the individual differences of others through their actions and words? And even if we look at social management and look at 4C, which is one that comes up a lot, students demonstrate the ability to prevent, manage, and resolve interpersonal conflicts in constructive ways, but also adults around showing how to solve problems in constructive ways through their words and actions. So as we look at these particular competencies, again, hyper focus on the idea that there is both student actions and there's also adult actions. All right, the definition earlier had the process through which students and adults develop these skills. We have to teach it, and we have to model it ourselves. We have to take a look at our schools and ask, are there universal inputs within our buildings and within our districts that allow for students to directly be taught the SEL competencies and skills so that students can get better over time? Students have to be able to set goals around these competencies and indicators. For many of us, I know for myself, I learned these skills through life experiences. In 2021, that can no longer be the case. We must treat social emotional learning skills like we do math, like we do science and other core subject areas. When I walk into a building, and if I were to come in and say, tell me a little bit about what's going on in math, what's going on in other core subject areas, there will be an instructional focus, there will be how students are doing, we'll have some data in terms of our growth, the areas of concern, right? And so we have to be able to give that same type of download, right? We have to give that same type of download to social emotional learning. So as we think about this, I wanted to provide an example of what that looks like, because in order to create alignment and coherence, to create equity, we have to think about all the inputs within our building. So I wanted to take you on another journey. So we've been to DC, we went to Texas, and now we're gonna come back to New York to a school in the Bronx, which is the Bronx School for Law, Government, and Justice, which is an urban assembly school. And so here you see, as a school, they've taken the opportunity to look at their instructional practices. So their theme is liberation, genius, and joy. And so we're looking at liberation instruction, and we're going to take a look at all the different instructional practices, right? And we're looking at, they've described it. They said that liberation instruction is when our students become empowered and independent citizens, they will navigate the world with a critical lens and make decisions that positively impact social change. We have identified that this is a universal support, so all students have access to it, right? There is no student that does not have access to this instruction, right? And so now we've also aligned it to the idea that 3B, where students should demonstrate consideration for others and a desire to positively contribute to their community. So liberation instruction specifically will activate social awareness in young people. And then how it's going to do that is that liberation instruction promotes students' demonstration of consideration for others and a desire to positively contribute to their community by making them aware of injustices in our society and making them aware of the ability to create change. And so we have to really think about our schools and think about all these different inputs. I'm going to show you the genius instruction, right? So here they have identified that genius instruction, which again is a universal input, that all students will have ability to get this type of an instruction. It's engaging students in learning experiences that cultivate their ability to be critical thinkers for the purpose of social change. But again, we look at 1B, which is self-management. So now we know that self-management will be activated, specifically students demonstrating awareness of their personal traits. Genius instruction promotes students' awareness of their personal traits by allowing students to participate in self-assessment with rubrics that will help them identify their strength and areas of growth. Now, this is work that we have to do to, again, allow for students to create opportunities for them to learn, but in an equitable way, so that all students are getting the opportunity to activate social and emotional learning. And we look at joy instruction, which is learning that meets the needs and interests of students and engages them in finding and pursuing their passions, right? And so they say at LGJ, which is the acronym, which is 4A, so this is around self-awareness, that students will use positive communication, students will use positive communication and social skills to interact effectively with others. So joy instruction will promote students' use of that by creating student-friendly classroom environments that are open, flexible, celebrate student growth. Students feel free to explore and express their opinions. When we take the time to look at our schools and all of our inputs, it allows for us to create a systemic approach to social emotional learning. The truth of the matter is that if I lived in a utopian society, we would have more social workers and we would have more school counselors, school psychiatrists in our schools than police officers. But the truth of the matter is that's not the utopian society that we live in. And so as we create alignment and coherence to create equity, we have to look at all the inputs and build the capacity of all schools and everybody inside the school, from teachers to administrators, to support staff, to be able to activate social emotional learning. And how we do that is to look at our inputs within the building so that we can create that alignment and coherence and build capacity across the school. So as we get to closing thoughts, and then I'll open it for questions, while SEL alone will not solve longstanding and deep-seated inequities in the education system, it can help the school promote high-quality educational opportunities and outcomes for all students, irrespective of race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, and other differences. Systemic implementation of SEL both fosters and depends upon an equitable learning environment where all students and adults feel respected, valued, and affirmed in their individual interests, talents, social identities, cultural values, and backgrounds. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about how, and when we create systemic approach to social emotional learning, that is also creating equity for our students. And there I will open it up for some questions and comments.
Brandon, if I can ask you a question really quickly, the information that you shared about joy, and where is that? Is that able to be shared publicly, or is that those standards?
I can share I can share the presentation for everybody to use.
I think that's would be really helpful as people develop SEL lessons and use what they have in their districts. Thank you.
I'm not sure if there were any questions.
Yeah, Brandon, there was one question in the chat box in relation, does the Urban Assembly provide SEL assemblies for elementary, middle schools or teacher PD days?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. We definitely do that. We have, I can share my contact, or Kate can share the contact, whichever works best, and would love to have that conversation with anyone who's interested.
That's so great. Brandon, you're amazing. I think you're amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I know you provided some really great strategies. Urban Assembly is incredible. Very, very, very connected organization in the SEL world. I encourage you all to check them out. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come and present with us. And Brandon, do you want to say really quickly just a second on what you're doing with your PLC, and if anybody wants to reach out to you to get involved in that? Are you still accepting people for your?
Yes, absolutely. We at the Urban Assembly, we have created a directors and leaders of social emotional learning professional learning community. Right now, it's actually over 30 people, which is really cool, from all over the country. What I find in this work is that there's a few things. One is that the director of social emotional learning is a relatively new title, right? It's an FTE that's being created across the country. Only so many people have been a director of social emotional learning in terms of doing these practices and focusing on the explicit implementation of social emotional learning and competencies. And so I think it starts to feel like a silo, because you're in your own district. Sometimes it's prioritized, sometimes it's not. And so we bring people together to share best practices and learn from each other. So we have almost 15 different states represented. So if that's something that you're interested in, and just learning and sharing best practices and learning from others around what's working, what's not working, similar to what's going on today, where we're sharing best practices, we're more than welcome to be a part of our professional learning community.
Amazing, Brandon. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. At this time, we're going to move into some district spotlights on what they're doing with SEL to help in your own district implementation and share. So I'm going to go ahead. And Melissa, do you want to share your screen, or I have your slides embedded and I can go through? So I'm going to go ahead and share.
You want to go ahead and share? That's fine. That's what I was planning on.
Okay, great. Let me just make sure. Can you see the screen, Melissa?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. So Melissa is from Silver Lake Regional School District. She's the K-6 curriculum coordinator and Title I director there. And I'm just going to go to your first slide. Thanks so much for joining us. I can get there. There we go.
And I have joining with me too today here is Judy Mason, and she's one of our school adjustment counselors from our 3 through 6 school. So just to give a little bit of a background, Travis had asked me to talk about our program and how we had implemented second steps over this pandemic lifestyle due to some success that we're seeing this year. And so just to give you a little bit of background on us as a school district, we have about 1,800 students K to 6. We're located on the South Shore of Massachusetts. Our diversity is a lot within our population and not necessarily within the cultural background of our students. And we have been in the hybrid mode full steam since September with no changes, but we are going to a full in-person learning starting March 22nd. So we came across the idea of needing a social emotional curriculum really based out of some transitions that happened in the district where we brought in behaviorists, we were adding to our school adjustment counselors, we were seeing more and more of a need to be able to support students and a need for a common language for when students were being sought with for a tier 2 support, and with some sort of environment where we could have this ability for teachers to talk with other teachers about how they were supporting their students in the classroom around social emotional learning. We had done a lot of professional development as a district with our staff around the CASEL model, and we knew that we now needed to find the transfer of that into our students, and then also needed to make sure that we were doing a strong bullying prevention unit with all of our students. So you can go to slide 2. So we were in the midst of this SEL task force that was meeting and reviewing curriculums and looking at them and planning to pilot. And then we went full remote almost exactly a week from this time last year. And so we, as a committee, remotely decided to purchase the Second Steps curriculum for an implementation PK through 6, based mostly on a little bit of history of usage within the district and a feeling that it was something that we had the capacity to move forward with. So I have linked some documents in here, and if I think that this will get shared out after this presentation and you guys will be able to access. We did a full day of implementation in person, 6 feet apart with masks to try and get things up and running across all of our elementary schools. We tried to think really proactively about what were going to be the pitfalls, what was going to go wrong. How are we going to guarantee that we could have this tier 1 support for all of our students? We created a scope and sequence so that we could kind of hold ourselves accountable, that we were moving through the curriculum throughout the year, and we could create themes around the different topics. So if the theme was empathy, how do we connect that into a building theme? How do we connect that out to parents? How do we announce it to the community? How do we make sure that everyone is aware of what the students are learning about? We then did the typical plan of the Massachusetts school districts, which is that we had the first 10 days of school for professional development, and we were able to commit one of those to SEL and to Second Steps, which was pretty phenomenal because typically the start of the school year, you get about a half an hour for PD. And so with 10 days, we were able to commit a lot of time to that. And we developed, based on that August PD day, training templates for each of the grade levels. So if you were a PK teacher, you got the early childhood training. If you were a K-2 teacher, you had that training template. There's a 3 through 5 training template. And then also in our 6th grade, we looked at the online curriculum. Teachers were able to collaborate, meet together, go through the training, complete the online modules for the social emotional curriculum, complete the online module for the bullying prevention, submit it to the district for PDPs, and then sort of say, okay, here you go, full steam ahead. Now in hybrid learning, go for it. Let's sort of see how it goes. And that was really September. And we started right into the curriculum and implementing it in the classrooms weekly with lessons, and almost completely hybrid, with the remote option being how the lessons were being administered to the students. So next slide. So then in January, we kind of said, okay, how are things going? Is this working? Lots of sort of off the cuff comments walking through the hallways from teachers about it. Every now and then you could kind of walk by and see a teacher on a Google Meet sharing one of the lessons, working through it. Impulsive Puppy was arriving within our buildings. Teachers were starting to use the language. We were seeing it. So we were really, really happy to see that at a Unit 1, 76% of the lessons were taught across the building. So, and not only that, there was a really great awareness with our support staff. So I was looking for special education teachers, paraprofessionals, the speech language pathologist. Was everybody able to be familiar with the curriculum? And I think one of the biggest things that benefited us was because of the pandemic, there was no sharing of materials. So every teacher had the resources, they had access to it, they completed the training individually. They were able to say there was nothing inhibiting them sort of logistically in order to be able to implement the program and use it. And what teachers started to see, and some of the pieces that came back as feedback, were that students were using the language. And they found that that was so beneficial in the classroom in order to lead to success, was that not only do I teach it, but we're starting to see them use it. They have this common language, and that they're transferring those knowledge and skills from the classroom to the cafeteria, to the playground, to the meeting with the school adjustment counselor. We saw benefits around self-regulation strategies. I had a teacher share with me today that yesterday was the 100th day of school for us, so lots of elementary celebrations. And they said, well, what have you learned in the first 100 days of school? And kids reportedly said, like, I've learned better how to self-talk. I've learned how to do belly breathing. So we can see the strategies coming into the classroom. And from my standpoint as a curriculum coordinator who's had a very different role within the buildings this year, I'm seeing lots of positive feedbacks from teachers around the relationship that they're building with their students. And I think that having them do these lessons with the students are really helping to build those connections. So I put this quote in there that came from one of our teachers, which said that the SEL curriculum has given them a platform to gather and voice their thoughts about bullying and goal setting. Furthermore, it has facilitated community building. So we see it as a success. We're just sort of excited that the process has been successful. I don't know why or how all the details came together the way that they did, but we can feel pretty confidently that right now we have a tier 1 support for our students. And I think some of our hybrid model with the smaller class size has been a really important component to that. When you only have 10 or 15 kids in the room with you in some of our buildings, it can help to build that teacher relationship. So next slide. So really now we are in this stage where we're thinking about what our next steps are. How do we promote the language with all of our staff? We need to get it from our classroom teachers who've been teaching the lessons to all of the staff who work with the students throughout the building. Our communication with families wasn't as ideal as we thought, and we know it's an area that we can improve and we can be better upon. We also know that the 6th grade topics, it's difficult from our standpoint that our 6th grade is housed in our elementary schools. We always sort of say that we're a K-5 and 6 district for our elementary schools. So I know that we actually have Bonnie and Travis joining us, which is really nice to do some implementation support for our 6th grade teachers. And then we need to think about sustaining the program. How do we keep it engaging? How do we maintain the support? How do we build it throughout the building? So we're excited about it. I know that there are little things that we've been able to do. Like I just gave one of our school nurses a Be Calm Bunny. And I said, you should have this in your office. Like this is a part of who we are as a school. And this is a common piece of our community that you can use with the students. So just constantly always thinking about that. But overall, I have used Second Step now, and this is the 2nd school district that I've worked in. It's nice to see the success, and it's nice to see teachers really, really confident with the program, but also the ease of implementation and the success that they're seeing in their classroom. So it's been a pandemic win. And there's a few losses in there too, but they're not related to this.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Melissa. What a wonderful district spotlight. Thank you so much. And all of your work, I think you are doing brilliantly. I appreciate all of the efforts, especially during this pandemic. Holy wow, it has been a journey, I am sure. For someone who used to be in the schools, I can only imagine. So our second, but thank you very much. I guess, is there any question? Are there any questions kind of quickly for Melissa and for Silver Lake? As we go forward, I didn't see anything come through the chat box, so
The last thing I'll say is just that having Judy, who's here with me, just to sort of like really celebrate her good work, is that it was essential to have those teams in every school that were the go-to experts. They were the people to go to, and the people who knew that if the teachers were able to do it, they could help them to be more successful.
For sure. Great strategies. Thank you so much. Our next district is Framingham School District, also in Massachusetts, kind of a medium-sized district. She'll tell you more about it, but Sarah is the PBIS coordinator there. And Sarah, if you want to go ahead, do you want to share your screen or do you want me to walk through?
Yeah, I'll share.
Okay.
So thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Sarah DeLuca. I'm the PBIS coordinator for Framingham Public Schools, and I'm excited to share an overview of our SEL journey with you, which of course has included Second Step. Framingham is located about 20 miles west of Boston in Massachusetts. There are approximately 9,000 students in our district that are spread out over 14 different schools. Of those 9,000 students, we have an array of different cultures, races, and languages. Framingham has 61% of students who fall into the high needs category, which is about 12% higher than the state average. Given the needs of our student body in Framingham, we look to support the whole student. We try to link behavioral, social, emotional, and academic needs together through our multi-tiered support system. Our multi-tiered support system is always a work in progress, but as we move forward, our path has really been reflecting the multi-tiered support system blueprint that's laid out by the Massachusetts Department of Education. What has really set us aside and really drives our multi-tiered support system and our SEL initiative is the structures that we've been able to put in place over the last 3 years. The structures are designed to funnel work from the district level down into every classroom. So at the district level, there's support from the director and assistant director of the Health and Wellness Department, as well as the assistant superintendents. This support comes in the form of accountability for schools, funding, and making professional development time available. As a coordinator of PBIS, I work directly with our social, emotional, and mental health team. This team primarily focuses on students in need of Tier 3 support, and together we spread the district-wide initiatives out to the schools. Within our schools, specifically our elementary schools, we have social, emotional, and behavioral coaches that work to build teacher and support team capacity and implement these district-wide initiatives and systems. The work of the coaches is exciting, and it's really making significant differences in each building, but we also realized that there had to be an accountability piece if we wanted fidelity of practice. So the assistant principals have served in that roles for accountability. Having these clear responsibilities has really helped us move forward with our initiatives in a structured way. With structures in place to support the work, we rolled out a large SEL initiative targeting the elementary level in 2019. We used 3 implementation strategies for our SEL. The first is looking at the environment, building an inclusive school and classroom community where every student feels valued and supported. Curriculum, SEL skills that are explicitly taught as part of a Tier 1 curriculum. And then integration. SEL is fully embedded into all aspects of the school day with fidelity. So we can take a closer look at each of our implementation strategies, starting with building inclusive school and classroom environments. One of our first steps was creating a list of high leverage social, emotional, behavioral practices. We did so by crosswalking signature practices from responsive classroom, restorative justice, and PBIS. The high leverage social, emotional, behavioral practice wheel that we created serves as a resource for teachers to use. Our social, emotional, and behavioral coaches use it during their coaching cycles. Each of the 5 domains that we fell on link to pages full of videos and articles and resources to help teachers with their practice in their classroom. Our second implementation strategy was choosing a Tier 1 SEL curriculum. So in 2019, we implemented Second Step SEL in addition to Zones of Regulation as our Tier 1 elementary curriculum. This spring, we are working on supporting teachers as they connect the concept from Second Step and Zones of Regulation together. Additionally, we have a character education theme of the month that is used pre-K to 8. The themes that we chose connect to the curriculum and give schools a focus for SEL related read aloud books, community meetings, and integration ideas. Our last strategy is focusing on the way that SEL can be integrated into all aspects of the school day. We've worked with our partner organization, Engaging Schools, to adopt their learning and life competencies as our SEL district-wide competencies. These competencies drill down to target behaviors and skills that we hope to instill in all of our students over the course of their education in Framingham. So having this universal set of skills and target behavior has really been instrumental in our process of fully integrating SEL. The 4 competencies that we are using in Framingham are self-awareness, self-management, social efficacy, and academic efficacy. They're in the process of being rolled out district-wide, and they will really be the driving force behind a newly designed code of conduct, character, and support. Starting with specialists this year and a larger audience next year, we've provided a cheat sheet on really how to integrate our SEL competencies into teaching. So generally, our cheat sheet guides teachers to think about the SEL skills that are needed to complete any given task during the school day: academic task, social task, even passing in the hallway, transitions. And it reminds teachers that they need to directly teach those skills and encourages teachers to give feedback, for students to self-assess if they met that skill, and to problem solve and reteach as needed. So integrating SEL into all aspects of the school day, our third strategy, will definitely be an ongoing challenge for us here in Framingham, but this was our first step. So in thinking back, there definitely have been some lessons that we've learned over the last few years that I just wanted to share out. The first is just accepting that everything is always a work in progress, and you will always be working towards fidelity. And the faster you accept that, I think the faster you can actually move forward. That the focus must first be put on the adult before you can expect change in students. So our social, emotional, behavioral coaches, their primary work is with the adults in the building and building their capacity. And perhaps most important now, given the tremendous need, is that to remind yourself of what you've accomplished and spend a moment to really celebrate that, because systemic change is not easy. So make sure you take the time to celebrate. Thank you for having me here today. I'll take any questions or comments.
See if anybody has a question in the chat box. or you are welcome to raise your hand and we might be able to unmute you if you have a question for Sarah. Thank you so much for presenting on Framingham's work. I know you guys have worked so hard in the last couple of years to bring social emotional learning to your district. And I remember personally going out there to do a live training. So I am super excited to see you guys represented here and to share your work. So I know we had, yeah.
I see that Marissa raised her hand. Marissa, if you should be able to unmute and go and ask your question if you like, or you can just type in the chat box also.
And then I think there was just a question from Laura. If you're using more than one program, how do you assess success?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one we're really just tackling this year. So this year we have been primarily remote. So we have had to redesign how we deliver our curriculum. So basically, we've started the year with zones of regulation and are moving into second step. So as we've redesigned our curriculum, we have put in some formative assessment for students. We've included teacher surveys, surveys from the social emotional behavioral coaches when they're doing their coaching within the classroom. And then as we move forward with our second set of curriculum, our second step curriculum, we'll be doing the same thing to really be doing some student surveys, some teacher surveys. We also collect district-wide behavior data and pretty actively monitor trends. And schools support teams also monitor those trends. But it's definitely a work in progress to really ensure that we're being successful and that we're doing it with fidelity.
Awesome. And there's another question for you too. Thank you so much for that one. I don't know if you can probably see it, Sarah. It says, I love that you are integrating, Kristen shared this. I love that you are integrating SEL in the curriculum. We are working on curriculum mapping that includes SEL. What was your biggest barrier? It's a great question.
It is. So I think our biggest barrier is still that integration piece. The curriculum piece has been relatively easy because teachers were so eager for it. And we have a dedicated SEL block. So that fully integrating SEL into all aspects of the school day is definitely our most challenging piece, to get teachers, to get everybody in the building to think about the SEL component of everything they do and making sure that they're explicitly teaching it and reinforcing it and acknowledging it when they see it. So that is definitely our biggest barrier because it's a real shift in the way that things have been done.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, there was just a response that said, thank you, heavy lift, but important work. Yes, that statement could not be more true. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Sarah, so much. I am going to move us into our third and final district spotlight. This is Anne Arundel County Public Schools in Maryland. And I'm going to figure out how to multitask and share my screen as I'm trying to talk to. And so there is that. So this is Shirley Jackson Avery, who is the coordinator of school counseling for K-8, and Ryan Voltland, who is the director of student services. And so I'm going to go through, they shared their slides with me, so I'm just going to go through and do this. And Ryan and Shirley, I'm going to pass this off to you.
All right, thank you, Kate.
Yeah.
As you said, I'm here with my colleague, Shirley Jackson Avery. And we're just going to talk a little bit about our journey into social emotional learning, just some background on Anne Arundel County Public Schools. We are a large district. We have approximately 85,000 students. We're located, and the city of Annapolis is within our county. We're located right on the border of Baltimore City. We're about 30 minutes from Washington, D.C. It's a very geographically diverse county as well as demographically diverse county. We have about 128 schools in our district. So our journey into social emotional learning, our recent journey, I would say happened about 5 years ago. Shirley worked closely with and continues to work closely with middle school principals and created an advisory structure, which part of the advisory structure has social emotional learning lessons in it. These lessons were created by school counselors. They, and then each school has an advisory team that rolls these lessons out to the teachers. So as we've developed, as we continue on that journey, about 3 years ago, we started introducing the second step elementary curriculum, the new social emotional learning curriculum, into 10 elementary schools. We did a pilot of them. We cobbled together some funds from different offices because we saw the need. Which is, I think, in many districts around the country, we saw our younger children having more social emotional deficits. And we felt like we needed some stronger tier 1 programming to support that. We have over 450 student services staff, counselors, social workers, and psychologists, and pupil personnel workers, but we needed some more stronger tier 1 programming that teachers could provide instruction on in language and support kids with those skills. So we did that. It was successful. And then we got some grant funding after Parkland happened. Maryland passed what was called the Safe to Learn Act. We got some grant funding, and we decided to spend that funding, that grant money, on some preventative efforts. And we bought the Second Step social emotional learning curriculum for 30 additional schools in 2019-20. And then we did it for 40, our final 40 elementary schools this school year. So all 79 of our elementary schools now are using the elementary Second Step. And then we also, Shirley, the program that she was doing, she moved, we took that from the counselors developing lessons to now Second Step in middle school. So we're using that. And just other aspects of our journey, we're looking to use some further grant money to purchase the adult SEL so we can have our teachers continue to build their leadership skills when it comes to social emotional learning. And then we've started a high school wellness program through a partnership with Johns Hopkins University. So we have elements of social emotional learning and wellness in pre-K to 12 at this point. You can go to the next slide.
Okay, so like most school districts, AACPS is driven by data. Of course, attendance data, discipline data, achievement data. And looking at our data and our climate survey results, we asked ourselves, how do we attend to the needs of the whole child? And what attitude, knowledge, or skills do we need to teach, enhance, and practice? And so in our county, we adopted Castle's theory of SEL programming. And this includes the 4-step approach of teaching the explicit SEL skills, examining our teacher instructional practices, integrating SEL in our academic curricular areas, and creating organizational and climate strategies to improve our school culture. So Second Step provided us with an efficient and comprehensive way to provide SEL instruction. And we decided to start with a small group of Title I elementary schools, many of whom were already familiar with the older version of Second Step, and they were excited to hear that it had been updated. Elementary principals dedicated 15 to 20 minutes a day to Second Step because they believed that SEL programming would produce the behavioral and academic outcomes that we wanted. It took 3 years to fully fund all 79 elementary schools and outfit them with the kits and the posters. But at the middle school level, like Ryan mentioned, the advisory structure, which included community building circles and a student wellness block, that was already in place. And we had an electronic bank of lessons and activities for each grade level that we had created. At every single middle school, we have an advisory committee, and they handle the scope and sequence and the lessons that are to be delivered during advisory. But I will admit that it lacked efficiency and it lacked the ease of delivery for the teachers. And clearly it was not packaged as nicely as the Second Step program. So we have now had a year of Second Step, and the initial feedback from the teachers has been that Second Step is easy to navigate, that it's age appropriate, and that the content is relevant. Kate, next slide.
And so, being a big district, I think the barriers that we've encountered may be different than some of the other districts. But one thing is we don't have a social emotional learning office in our central office. So we have other responsibilities. So social emotional learning is one aspect of our job. So being able to support schools and monitor the implementation has that's definitely been a barrier, but we've worked hard to to support principals in terms of implementation. I would say funding sources has definitely been tough. But although we've been lucky to get some grants the last few years that has allowed us to purchase the materials, I think the logistics of fitting in the schedule has been a barrier. However, as curriculum instruction, our Office of Curriculum Instruction has realized the importance of social emotional learning and fitting it into our learning blocks. They have carved out time into the schedule. So once it's in the schedule, teachers know the importance of it and they do it. And so that's been really key. Other barrier has been educating staff on the importance of SEL and the CASEL SEL core competencies. Shirley's done an outstanding job of that with middle school, and we've done that with elementary also. And I think we get really good buy-in with elementary and middle on understanding why SEL is important and connecting it to what they're doing in terms of academics every day. I will say high school, as we've jumped into it this year, that has been definitely a tougher buy-in for high school because, my theory is that high school teachers, most of them teach one subject, and going into something different can be uncomfortable. So that's definitely been a tough barrier this year, but we're working through that. Consistency of delivery, just making sure, as I said before, that each school is implementing consistently. As a big district, it's harder for us to manage knowing that that's happening, but anecdotally, we believe that's happening. And then system-wide professional development and support for schools. We've done a train the trainer model. Kate has come and done trainings for our principals. We did a virtual one last year. And then our principals take that information, put it into a training for their specific schools. They usually work with their counselor, and then they train their teachers, and then their teachers implement, and then they use their counselor more as a support. And that's work, but that's definitely been something we've had to work through. But I would say, even though we have barriers, I feel that successes outweigh the barriers.
And so we implemented the final phase of second step during the pandemic, but it wasn't a surprise. Teachers knew, schools knew that we had this plan in the works. And so they were very receptive and they were really ready for it. So they really, just jumped right in and implemented the program. Our counselors handled training at the middle school level, and many of our counselors at the elementary level helped to train their staff on second step. And administrators do include this in their school improvement plans. Most schools have an SEL goal that includes teaching second step and then monitoring the fidelity of the delivery. It is perceived as an effective Tier 1 behavioral intervention. Teachers help students reflect upon the lessons and the skills that are taught. Expansion into the middle school. Second step is currently in all of our 19 comprehensive middle schools, our 3 charter middle schools, and our 2 alternative schools. I could see where they'll probably want different aspects of the program, to include more lessons, more activities for advisories. They've already started talking to me about what else can we deliver. Connection to restorative practices. Really, restorative practices and the teaching of SEL skills go hand in hand. So we do have a team actually, that goes around and trains for community building circles. And we've been using that as part of our advisory. And then finally, future expansion into adult SEL models. And I think Brandon Frame mentioned this. As you know, SEL is not just for kids, it's a lifelong process. And we have plans to purchase adult SEL modules to help improve the collaborative culture that we hope to see in all of our schools.
Good, and I just wanted to say we are, we're a few years into our journey, but I still think we're early in our journey. And what's been important is our board, our superintendent, like they embrace social emotional learning, mental health support, and so it's here to stay. I feel like we have a solid structure, and we're just going to continue to build on that.
Thank you both so much for sharing the journey. It has been fun to be a part of it. I am just thrilled that you're moving into adult SEL and then also potentially moving into, well, I don't know if you've made the final decision to move into the digital, migrating to their digital platform for K-5 too. So it'll be, I'm really excited. Anne Arundel is a huge district, and the undertaking that you all have done is just unbelievable. But there has been, I wish you had some principals here too, because it's always really fun to hear from them too. So thank you so much for sharing the work. Does anyone have any questions for Ryan or Shirley? Awesome.
Okay, can I just mention one thing? No one brought up parents. And I just wanted to mention that we did have some resistance from parents. And the way that we were able to navigate that is we would have counselors sit with families, virtually, and really go through some of the lessons with them and talk to them about the Second Step program and why this would be beneficial for their child. And really, that's how we were able to overcome those barriers and the resistance that we had at first.
Says this was a great presentation. They hit on the barriers and the successes so well. Yes. You guys have seen any and all of them, I'm sure. So any other questions, you can write them in the chat box, or we can try to figure out how to have anyone talk as well if you have questions for them. You guys just so eloquently put it together that that's just how you do it. Would you say that administrators buy-in is critical to getting teacher buy-in? Do you start with the administrator first and move to the staff? I think that's what.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't know if I mentioned it on my slide, but absolutely, we found that the schools that are doing it the best are the ones that have put it into their school improvement plans, that have tweaked, used Second Step's monitoring tool or created their own monitoring tool and gone in and monitored it and given teachers feedback, just like any kind of instruction. But absolutely, principal buy-in leads to teacher buy-in. And we actually have quite many of our clusters now have a social emotional learning goal on their school improvement plans, and that really, you put it on the school improvement plan, that means it's important to you and your school. So yes, definitely found that principal buy-in leads to better implementation.
And one of the things I'll just call out, one of the things that they did was, and you mentioned this in your slide, was that you brought all the principals to a room and you had them all, well, when I was there live or on a virtual setting, and they were all there as the leads of their school, obviously, and then pushing it out to their teachers, to their staff. So it started at that principal level, which I thought was really amazing. And that is actually a role that we play in the sense of really supporting at the school level, and then a role that Bonnie, if you saw her, plays as well in getting those principals ready to go to roll out from there. So you guys did that really well, and I thought it was awesome to be able to meet with all of those principals as they embarked on beginning this implementation.
Yeah, and honestly, I thought we weren't sure what principal or teacher buy-in would be, and it was surprisingly very positive. Like we didn't get, I can't think of any resistance, to be honest, in the elementary level, and I don't think the middle either. So I think people have been craving for some more support for especially some of our younger learners who are struggling. So yeah, and having that PD for principals, and now they have a contact that they can connect with. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just one question that came through about training. I just wanted to mention, Kate, thank you. You came for the elementary principals and actually trained our elementary teams. At the middle school level, what we did was we trained our school counselors, and then our school counselors are responsible for all the training for the rest of the faculty. So if a new person comes in, they don't know how to implement Second Step, then the counselor takes them through the platform and then assigns to them some of the training modules that are already included in SEL. But they give them the background and the history of our SEL journey.
It's amazing. That's right. I remember. That's really great. And a way to kind of get in the back door, it seems like, to get to the principals. That's a great way to think about it. Any additional questions for Brian or Shirley? Awesome. Thank you both so much. It's amazing to be a part of this. It's really, really great. Oh, just kidding. There's one here. So using your tier 1 intervention can help lay the groundwork to build up student grit in terms of focusing on the learning, with much of the noise in their heads quieted with better SEL environments. So more of a comment. So thank you so much, Stephen. That's an amazing call out. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to move to Jordan. And so Jordan, I think you wanted to share your screen as well. So the much awaited funding conversation. Where can we get money for social emotional learning? And Jordan is our esteemed policy and advocacy director here at Committee for Children. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so you can, Jordan. And so, and yeah, if you can introduce yourself and say what you do, that would be fantastic.
Of
and
course.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. Hello, everybody. I'm Jordan Posmatier, the Director of Policy and Advocacy with Committee for Children. It's what you've all been waiting for, the funding slides. Yay. You might all know that in addition to problem solving with communities like yours, we also work on state level and federal advocacy to advance SEL and related legislation so that things like funding can flow down to practitioners and schools and kids. And it's one of the main things that's going on in Congress right now, so I'm going to spend my time talking about Congress. My super short background, because I know we're limited on time, is I'm a former New York City public school teacher turned California attorney who moved up to Washington State to mess with federal and state advocacy. I've been doing it for a long time, so I'm just going to share the mischief we're in presently. Starting with COVID-19 relief, you know that there's funding coming your way. Here's a little bit about it. At the end of last year, we passed the second round of CARES dollars, totaling $82 billion to the Education Stabilization Fund. Now, you're going to get these slides later. You'll see that we conveniently marked all those that are conducive to supporting social emotional learning in orange. Anything not in orange, probably outside scope. But you'll see I'm going to spend a lot of time on ESSER here. That's the short version of the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. One of the things we did was make sure that that fund includes explicitly language around social emotional learning so that there's no doubt about it. You can spend it on SEL if you need to. It's very flexible. You can spend it on any number of other things, but SEL is in there and it's worth considering if you need it. Notice no orange on any of these, but we mention it because we know that when you're working in a hybrid or remote setting, you're going to need increased connectivity from broadband to tablets. Outside of the education COVID-19 relief, I'll also bring your attention to the Health and Human Services relief, because we know that communities across the country have tapped grants like Project Aware, which focus on substance use, student mental health, for purposes of supporting social emotional learning in schools. I also will mention the early learning projects because I know a lot of your school systems have early learning additions, including Head Start. I think these dollars at this point are designed more to keep the lights on in those areas rather than support curriculum and the like. So they're available, but I'm not sure how much they're going to be available for things like SEL. Outside of COVID-19 relief at the end.
You froze there for just briefly. Just go back to your previous slide really quick. There you
Sure.
are now, I think.
Okay. I mentioned that the federal appropriations and coronavirus investment mushed together to be called the Corona Bus. And I'm going to talk about the regular annual appropriations. Apologies for the loose connection. We are doing homeschool and the like that over here. So, you know, bound to happen. Just let me know when you miss it. I'll go back. So this slide, and there are several others like it, just show the many coffers we know historically that have been used to tap for SEL. Title I, IDA, Title II, especially Title IV-A. We know that this last round got, as you look at the top, 16.5 billion, which is up from last year by a whopping 227 million. You see the green marks with the up arrows. I'll tell you, despite our nation experiencing serious hardship during this time, it should come as somewhat gratifying to see that all these coffers have been increased, largely in response to the pandemic. Despite the turmoil in Congress, we seem to have impressed upon them the need to support students during this time, and that's reflected in this budget. Same is true here with the 46 billion. We know historically these have also been helpful. I'll just take a quick nod to the full service community schools. You might recall that Dr. Linda Darling Hammond led Biden's transition team. She is quite focused on community schools. I dare say more attention will be paid to community schools in the forthcoming administration. Last up, just another nod to Health and Human Services. If you run out of education dollars, health is on the way to help. So you might consider looking at these as well. You'll notice modest increases. I think a lot of you might not be aware of the National Child Traumatic Stress Initiative. It might be worth investigating with your state Health and Human Services department or similarly named, because they might have ideas that coincide with the work you're doing in your schools. Last thing I want to share, two things. One, I snuck a slide in, Kate, you'll forgive me, but I just wanted to make this super clear and easy for people around timelines. Your state education agency needs to award funds down to you, local education agencies, mostly school districts, between April and June of this year for the first round of COVID funding, ESSER 1. And then for this most recent round, the one that passed in December, you got to get those awards by January of next year. However, what you're allowed to spend on within those grants, within those awards, has a much greater range. From the start of the pandemic, that was March 13, you've got 1 year, so that ends in March 20 of this year, all the way down to September for your first round of dollars. And then the next round of dollars is simply a year after, that's 2023. So there's a little bit of space. I will tell you, according to the Congressional Budget Office, states are spending more and more quickly than anticipated. So the dollars are going, but they're still available should you need it. And that, if you need it, probably requires some advocacy on your part up to the folks who know about budgets. And last but not least, if you're curious what's happening presently, this is where we are so far in the latest round of COVID-19 budget negotiations. It's out of the House, over to the Senate. Approximately $130 billion has been set aside for ESSER number 3. What's different about this one is more attention paid to learning recovery, or as they say in Congress, learning loss, where, and the numbers might change, but generally we think this is where it's going to be. It's about 5% the states have to hold back to address learning loss, and then down to the local education agencies, another 20%. And what's cool about that is, once again, Committee for Children helped get language in there specifically addressing social and emotional learning, because once again, Congress kind of gets the need that if you're ever going to get to successful academic recovery, you're going to have to set the table first and keep feeding kids with really great pro-social, social emotional learning interventions so that everyone can get back to school learning together with a healthy mindset and relationships. Thus concludes my fancy congressional briefing to you.
That's awesome, Jordan. Thank you so much. You are always such a wealth of knowledge about where people can find funding, or would it be helpful if you shared that website that you shared with us the other day that talked about what districts?
Yes, see the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're curious.
What that is?
Yeah, this will tell you exactly how much is coming to you off CARES 1. And you can just click your state down to your thing, and that's the expected amount that goes down. Of course, it competes for all the other things that you need to spend on during this time, but we know that it's available for SEL if you need it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jordan. Are there any specific questions? I'm seeing the chat box just a little bit. Yep. Any questions for Jordan before he runs away from us? Oh, it looks like Passaic, New Jersey was able to use the MTSS grant from the US DOE to secure a 5-year, $2.5 million grant for the focus on implementing PBIS in all schools, 15,000 students. We are in year 2, maybe year 1, and working in cohorts of schools to roll out SEL training and support. So, oh yeah, okay. So Passaic Board of Ed in New Jersey was able to, this is the money they used to, sorry, year 2. Yes, thank you, Stephen. And so, oh, nice to see you. I know who you are. Thank you for attending the event. And so, yeah, so they purchased last summer with this money. So this is great. Thanks for sharing that. All right, last call for any questions for Jordan. All right, thank you so much for sharing that and taking the time out of your very busy congressional briefing schedule to come and chat with us. I appreciate your time. All right, so the last thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, and I am going to jump in about our next, there's Jordan again, about what's coming soon. There are incredible, amazing things happening at Committee for Children with the Second Step program. And so I just wanted to share with you, hopefully you've heard about this from our team and the people you saw those pictures of at the beginning and from myself. But if you have any questions, please reach out, please let us know. Just a few slides. And I know you heard a little bit of a snippet of information throughout a couple of the district spotlights, but in terms of what's happening with Second Step, we are launching actually in, I think, a little less than 2 weeks. We are launching our new Second Step Elementary digital program. So the biggest question that people are asking is, are the kits going away? And no, they are not. We are having 2 congruent programs running side by side. Of your district can choose to stay with the kits if they are research and evidence-based and work very successfully, or your district can choose to move to our brand new elementary digital program. This is a fully digitally delivered K-5 curriculum. And so it will be a subscription-based model where you can purchase the program for 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. Similar to the kit-based curriculum, it is taught 1 time per week. It's teacher-led. It's not a one-to-one program. It is includes lesson plans, again, scripted in bold. If you're familiar with the current KIT program. There are downloadable handouts to support student engagement. They are 15 to 25-minute lessons, and they're consistent across K through 5. And so I'll show just a little bit of the lesson here. More information about the lesson. So there's 20 lessons. The 5th lesson, there's 4 units, and the 5th lesson of every unit is a performance task. And this is a really great way to assess the social emotional skills and assess whether that student engaged in the lessons of that unit. But the really cool part about these performance tasks, if I can talk, excuse me, is that they really create their own identity and create their own way of showing that they understand that lesson through these performance tasks. So they could draw something, they could write something, they could speak about it, whatever works for them, and creating their own agency in deciding how they're going to show that. So so those units are called growth mindset and goal setting, emotion management, empathy and kindness, and problem solving. So we still have lots of the same language, but just really updated. And so school-wide licenses, kindergarten through grade 8. So what I've been saying is, if you have the middle school program, which launched digitally in 2017 and then was revamped significantly in August of 2020, this creates a seamless implementation of K-8 through your district. And so all content is in one place on secondstep.org. Easy to teach virtually, in person. As we know, it's kind of been all over the place, all over the country, and who knows what's coming, what's going to happen. There's tracking and monitoring tools for busy leaders, online resources, all of that. So, and of course, we have district consultation as you have contact with myself, Travis, or Chad, and you also have contact with Bonnie as well at that school level and with your principals. And then finally, as we close out, I really want to touch on a very exciting thing that's happening here. It's all exciting. I'm loving this word exciting today. I feel like I've said it 100 times in this presentation because I'm happy to have you all here. But we will be launching in later spring a social emotional learning for adults. This is a for educators by educators program. It is designed, again, it's digital. It works the same way in that 1 year, 3 year, 5 year license. It is fully digitally delivered as to kind of round out this holistic approach that we're having with, that we are embarking on with social emotional learning and Committee for Children. But this is, so it's designed to be taught per semester, and there are individual learnings, small group learnings, staff learnings as an entirety. They are focused on building trust. So they're designed to be done per semester. So you do one module per semester. And so the first module is building trust. The second is managing stress. We went way back to the beginning talking about equity and equity being SEL, so advancing equity amongst your staff and developing efficacy. And the super cool part about this is if you are looking for something for your high school schools, your high schools or your high school educators, we don't have a comprehensive SEL program for high school, which you know, but we have this, we have SEL for Adults to work with those high school educators. So this does go all the way through to high school. And so we encourage you to check that out. The link is here. And of course, these slides will be shared with you. Yeah, this is how, are there any questions about those two new programs? And I know we're kind of running out of time here, but those two programs that I just threw at you very briefly, happy to answer questions. All of us are happy to answer questions about them. Our website is really comprehensive as we gain more information and gather more information. Our website, web pages and websites are, our website is updated. So any questions? Beautiful. Are there any, is the chat box, am I seeing this? No, okay. All right, so, okay, shared. All right, well, I'm just gonna say thank you, and I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate all of your work. Thank you to our panelists for presenting their districts and talking about funding and talking about SEL as equity work as we build our brains and learn every single day about different parts of social emotional learning and equity and how to be better for our students and better in life. And so let us know if we can help you. We're always here, so happy to help in any way. And I just am super, super thankful for all of you for coming and being a part of our event. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.